Man, these FedEx drivers be crazy fast. Oh, maybe I can buy a cup now.
Hi, thanks for watching the second episode of The Exchange's Matchat, where we drink matcha and chat about various controversial issues. Now, we have received some hate comments in the past video because supposedly I did not offer my guests any drinks or refreshments. I'd just like to set the record straight that I do offer all of my guests any kind of beverages or refreshments they wish. So, as evident by, just the way. I was planning on, the clink. With that taken care of, today we're going to be talking about universal basic income with Sunny Zhao. Hi, Sunny. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me on, Christian.
So, how did you get your political beliefs, and where do you believe the strongest influence lies in how you view the political world today?
So, okay, I'm gonna be honest. When I was in ninth grade, I guess I started paying more and more attention to politics. And I got most of my politics from Tumblr, if I'm being completely honest. So I believed in a lot of really left-leaning liberal things. And over time, as I spend more time in debate, I guess I've become a little more moderate on that front. And especially with finding out about Andrew Yang, I find it a lot harder to identify myself as purely Democrat or Republican. A little bit of how I found out about Yang. So my sister texted the family group chat about, she was at this tech conference, she took a picture with her arms around this Asian guy and was like, whoa, look at me, I just took a picture of myself with a presidential candidate, his name's Andrew Yang, and I was like, who the hell is this dude? So I Google Andrew Yang, I see his platform, he's offering a universal basic income of $1,000 a month for every American adult above the age of 18, and I'm like, this is kind of dumb, I'm out. So a few months down the line, I'm watching an interview with Bernie Sanders because I kind of like Bernie. He fits more of what I believe. And then I see in my recommended there's also an interview with Andrew Yang. So I'm like, you know what? Maybe this will be funny. I'll have a laugh. And then I clicked on the video. And then 45 minutes later, I am sent down a rabbit hole of Andrew Yang videos. So, I think Andrew Yang has really expanded, I guess, what I think of in terms of political ideology. He's offered a lot of really interesting perspectives because he himself is very non-ideological. He backed Bernie in 2016, but now, even to this day, his platform has always been I am literally for whatever works, doesn't matter which side it comes from. I'll support it either way if it helps fix the problem that we're trying to solve, So I really respect that kind of ideology, and I guess that's what I most identify with. Kind of long answer. You can cut that down.
All right, so that sounds wonderful. I mean, Tumblr is, a place to get news, and the Exchange is a place to get news too. So maybe you should consider both of them now. But anyway. So you mentioned something about Andrew Yang giving $1,000 per month. Now that sounds pretty crazy in terms of common economical sense. But how do you believe that $1,000 is going to be implemented, and do you believe it's actually going to be helpful for America?
Yeah. So a basic income actually has a really long history in the United States. When I first heard about it, I thought this was some crazy new techie idea. But all the way back to our founding fathers, so Thomas Paine was for it at the founding of the country. Martin Luther King was for it, and even economists like Milton Friedman, he's this really popular libertarian economist, even endorsed a plan similar to a universal basic income, and so did 1,000 other economists alongside Milton Friedman. And it almost became law in the 1970s under the Nixon administration. It passed the House of Representatives twice. So to give you a sense of how like mainstream the idea used to be. So, damn, what was your question again?
So essentially, how would you describe the $1,000 per month? Because I believe to many viewers and to many people, $1,000 per month might not make sense in terms of how everything's going to be balanced out, how the economy is going to be functioning, things like that.
Yes. So how it would work, so I mentioned the economists because they recognize that actually being able to give this $1,000 a month and having it in the hands of every American citizen means that there's going to be more money circulating throughout the economy, through like families, communities, local businesses. Because like when you get this $1,000 a month, you know, like you're gonna spend it, right? It's gonna go into stores, because like consumers have more income, there's going to be more demand for all these goods and services. So businesses see more action. They have to expand to accommodate all this new demand, and that in turn results in hiring more and more people. And it's really important that we have like this kind of like economic stimulus in the economy, especially right now, because we have automation that's projected to, and in some ways already has, eliminated a lot of the most common jobs in the US. So I believe McKinsey projects that 30% of American jobs are going to be just destroyed. We already see some of this happening, and ever since the 2000s, we just eliminated 4 million manufacturing jobs in this past time frame. And some people even think that, oh, that kind of might be why Donald Trump won, because he in some ways addressed this job loss, unlike Democrats who are kind of like, you know, not really a problem. So we had like entire communities who just suddenly their jobs were gone because robots are just much better at manufacturing things. They don't need sleep, they don't need pay, they don't need healthcare, and it makes a lot of economic sense for businesses to do this. It sucks though for workers to get laid off. So this happened to manufacturing workers, and the data shows that there's sort of like this straight line up between communities who have experienced this intake of industrial technology and the move towards Donald Trump. So a lot of states that like used to vote like blue for Obama suddenly just went straight to Trump. So with that change in mind, there's going to be a lot more jobs that are going to be automated away. So think retail, call center, fast food, right? Like you walk into a McDonald's and there's a self-checkout kiosk. You walk into Walmart and they also have a self-checkout as well. So when we have those, that usually means reduced hours for the people who work there, and they aren't even like getting a pretty decent minimum wage. And now imagine what's going to happen to them when their jobs are just gone. And it's going to get even worse. We're going to have literal like automated robots going down aisles, being able to scan food packages and doing inventory at a much less costly rate than a human employee can. So that's going to create some huge changes, and that's a big reason why we need a basic income. To sort of, it's not going to be the final solution to, I guess, preventing job loss, but it's supposed to provide a floor for all Americans so that when they lose their job, they're not going to like starve to death. And they have some freedom to maybe prepare in the future for when this comes, and have some sense of security.
All right. So we're both taking an AP economics class, and we've obviously learned about the laws of supply and demand. And we've also learned about inflation. So a lot of criticism has been drawn over the idea that if everyone receives $1,000 per month, the value of $1,000 is going to be going down because everyone has $1,000 per month. Do you believe this to be, well, first of all, true, and second of all, do you believe this to be a severe problem for the economy overall?
Okay, yeah. So I don't think it's 100% true. In 2008, when the financial crisis happened, our government literally printed $4 trillion to bail the banks out. And we printed this money, and we didn't really see any, rise in prices then. So with what we're doing now, the money that's going to fund this freedom dividend or universal basic income, Yang calls it a freedom dividend, for all Americans, that's coming from money that's already existing in our economy. So we're not printing anything new. So the value of the dollar is actually going to remain relatively stable. So there's not going to be any inflation in that regard. So for price inflation, it's also still going to be unlikely, because like if you like go down the street to Steve's and they raise the price of their fries to like $15, they're gonna be like, I'm not gonna take this. I'm gonna like go to McDonald's or go to In-N-Out. So all it really takes is like one business to not price gouge you for all these other businesses to be held in line. There's still going to be competition in the market once we have this $1,000. It actually increases the buying power of the bottom 97% of Americans, so we won't have to worry about inflation in those areas. Areas that we do need to worry about inflation though, and this would happen, or this is happening regardless of like a universal basic income, are in these three areas, and this is what's screwing us over the most. So it's housing, healthcare, and what we care about most, education. The cost of college, it's going up and it sucks. So in those areas, a freedom dividend can actually kind of help you pay off parts of those areas, although I do believe Yang has some specific policies targeted to address those areas. But just on its own, a universal basic income would not increase prices.
All right. I mean, that sounds great, but do you believe that there are any factors that have limited us from actually implementing this already if everything seems to be in line?
I guess it could be that we're having a lot of trouble sort of diagnosing the big reasons, kind of like why Donald Trump went into office. And what's happening to our economy. I don't think many politicians really understand what's happening to our economy. The 2020 race, to choose our new president has been going on for over a year now. And it wasn't until like 2 weeks ago that on the Democratic stage, on this national stage, that anyone spoke anything about the economy. Before it was about, important topics like climate change and immigration and healthcare, but like the economy, nothing. No one was talking about it. And I think it's just that many people don't want to address the problem of automation because from a political standpoint, the solutions that you would have to implement, like a universal basic income, are very radical and do kind of scare a lot of people. To be honest, like the politicians in the United States, they don't necessarily do whatever's good for the people, but whatever is good for, public, like what their polls say or what public opinion says. A universal basic income isn't popular right now. I think the approval rating is hovering between 40 to 50%. It's actually been growing ever since Yang came onto the scene, but it wasn't super popular. So I think that might in part be why we haven't already had a universal basic income earlier. I mentioned early in like the 1960s that the House of Representatives passed it twice. We almost came close to getting it into law. And the reason why we didn't was because Democrats were actually like, oh no, this isn't enough. We're gonna, table this bill and throw it in the trash. And then Nixon got, the whole Watergate scandal happened. He got out of office, the pendulum swung the other way, and we kind of, after Nixon, we kind of saw this era of conservatism that wasn't necessarily receptive to a universal basic income. So I think those two reasons might be why.
I see. Real quick, I didn't address this before, but how do you believe that the actual funds for the $1,000 dividend would be brought about from the federal government, seeing as we are in trillions of dollars of debt?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so right now our government has a revenue problem where we have these companies who are closing down 30% of malls and stores across the US, who are leaving essentially, millions of manufacturing workers unemployed. We have these technology companies who are doing all these things and removing all these wages, and then we're not actually getting any of it in return, right? Like you guys might have heard, Amazon, how much did they pay in taxes last year? Zero, like nothing. And we're talking one of the most wealthiest, probably the wealthiest company in the United States, sucking up billions of dollars in revenue from these other small businesses, and they aren't paying any of it back in federal income taxes. And it's not just Amazon, it's also Google and Uber and Facebook, and they find ways around the tax code. What they're doing right now is actually completely legal. So we have this problem where they essentially don't pay the billions of dollars in taxes that they should. So that's how we're going to fund universal basic income. We're going to implement this new mechanism. It's called a value added tax. literally every other advanced economy besides the US has already implemented it because they realized like, oh, what these technology companies are doing might actually be a problem. So what Amazon does right now to avoid taxes is like they reinvest in themselves. I think Google pushes their money into Ireland, so they're like, oh, we make no income in the US, can't tax us. So a value-added tax doesn't tax income, it actually taxes transactions. So basically what happens is any transaction, so every sale that Google makes through their Google Ads service or YouTube for that matter, or in the future, every robot truck mile, like every single transaction along the way, that gets taxed. We take a little toll of that, and then that gets distributed to the American people. So a lot of it's going to come through a value-added tax. Then we have other forms of funding. So a universal basic income kind of funds itself because once everyone has $1,000 in their hands, we actually see a lot of savings in things like incarceration rates, which will go down. Yang's plan is basically if you are in jail, you don't get your $1,000. So people actually have a real incentive to not go in jail anymore. They have the financial resources to maybe lift themselves up so they don't have to resort to crime. And we actually see a lot of savings that way. There was this one correction officer who talked to Yang who basically said like we would literally save so much more money if we just gave people who got out of jail $1,000 because right now we pay way more just keeping them in jail. So we would see a lot of savings with reduced crime, better healthcare savings, better educational outcomes, all these other social benefits that happen when we have this financial security.
I see. So you mentioned automation taking over many jobs in things such as the retail industry or the manufacturing industry, and that is a growing problem in today's society. Do you believe that there is a final solution? Maybe a bit presumptuous to say it right now, but do you believe that there is a proposed final solution that would be addressing that matter?
I don't think we can even begin to address like the final solution, like what our society would look like maybe 50 to 100 years right now if we don't have this basic income. Yeah, I think we really need this UBI as sort of like a starting point. So I mentioned earlier, a basic income isn't going to be like the final solution, but if we don't have a UBI, but suddenly we have all these like thousands of people who are going to be displaced at a rate that's faster than any like previous industrial revolution, we might possibly see riots, which usually occur when we have like literal millions of the population who are just suddenly unemployed. When we have all this chaos that's happening, we can't even begin to sort of imagine what happens in the future. But I guess the ideal would be that we have these companies, because automation is going to eliminate a lot of jobs. And I think in some ways we should be happy about that. Like, no one's like happy about having to be a McDonald's cashier for the rest of their life, right? Like, we should be like really happy that, automation is going to make our lives more convenient and easier. It's the government's job, though, to make sure that nobody gets left behind. And with the way we are right now, that's probably what's going to happen.
I see. So is there anything else you'd like to address that we haven't mentioned so far?
I guess I want to talk a little bit more about another plank of Yang's platform that kind of ties into a universal basic income. So he has this thing called human-centered capitalism, which has a lot to do with reshaping the way that we think about our economy, national well-being, and our own value. So right now, we're learning this in econ. The number one way we measure national well-being, and we see this in the newspapers, this is what Trump and other presidents brag about when they're asked by reporters, how is the nation doing? What progress have you made as a president? They point to GDP, they point to the stock market, and they point to unemployment numbers. The last one actually makes a little sense, but there are some problems with that. So like GDP doesn't really impact a lot of us at all. I mean, I don't think we or our parents like wake up in the morning and are like, wow, I'm excited to contribute to GDP. No one's, it's just a number really. So it's not real for many Americans. And actually with automation, we're gonna see all this like productivity and GDP go like up and up and up. but all these people who are going to be unemployed and jobless and wageless, and it doesn't account for things like suicides or drug overdoses or life expectancy, which are much more real for all of us. So that's a problem with GDPs. Same with stock market, a lot of the similar problems with GDP, and also only, I think, the bottom 80% of Americans own like 8% of the stock. So again, not really representative of how all of us are doing. And then unemployment numbers don't actually account for people who have already just given up on a job. I think the way you calculate unemployment is the percentage of people who are looking for a job, the percentage of people who have a job out of those who have a job and are already looking for a job. So unemployment actually doesn't account for people who are on disability, like many of the manufacturing workers that got displaced. They just went to disability and gave up on finding a job because they couldn't, or mothers, or fathers of stay-at-home parents, or caregivers, because they're not looking for a job because they're caring for their kids or their parents. So Yang's idea is basically we need to start valuing work that the market doesn't. Because we're kind of stuck in this trap where basically if the market doesn't value your work, then you have no value. And like, that's not true. Like what we're doing right here, the market does not value this at all. You're not getting compensated, you're not getting paid for it at all. But what you're doing here is like really, really valuable. And same with like, and same with like, the arts. I'm an artist myself. Market doesn't necessarily, value what I'm doing. Same with being a caregiver or raising children. Like raising children is some of the most valuable work there is. But again, what does the market value that at? 0. So what Yang wants to do is when we talk about national well-being, it's not just going to be about these phantom numbers. It's going to be about things like life expectancy, high school graduation rates, percentage of drug overdoses, suicides. Is our population depressed or are they happy? So things that actually really matter to us.
Anything else you'd like to address?
No, that's all. Or actually, one more thing. If you want to learn a little bit more about Yang, I would recommend his interview on The Breakfast Club. What I've said is like only a fraction of this man's mind. I think he is probably the most like direct and clear-cut politician that I have ever listened to, and I have listened to a lot of these people talk. And if you do like really care about your future, like please check him out.
All right. Well, thank you very much for sharing your perspective.
Yeah.
If you like to disagree with Sunny's perspective or Thomas's perspective, or you'd like to share your own perspective on a completely different topic, please let us know and we'll try to schedule an interview with you. Other than that, thank you very much for watching.